What real-life story had the biggest plot twist you've ever seen? Story 1, I graduated law and got engaged to the girl I had been with through university. We both applied for the same graduate program and ended up working in the same office in Canberra. 3 months before our wedding, I found out she was cheating on me with our mutual boss, and I broke it off with her. Long story short, it got really ugly, and the two of us ended up in a very bitter court case over property. Canberra is a pretty small city, and the legal world is pretty bloody small there too. And everywhere I went, I bumped into my ex. It was beginning to seriously get me down, her too, as it transpired. And I applied for an Australian government overseas development job in Tuvalu, a Pacific island with about 11,000 population. It is quite a prestigious job to get, with only 2 positions offered for a 2-year contract on a rotating basis. I was successful in the application and moved on island to start my posting, to discover that my ex was the other successful applicant. I spent the next 2 years sharing a tiny office on a tiny island with the person that I quite honestly loathe more than any other in the world. Story 2. The one guy I worked with was having a baby. He told me about his girlfriend. Yeah, she is pretty big, but she is amazing. She is the one for me. I did not know him very well, but as he talked about the pregnancy and so forth, and I gave him encouraging words and how his life was going to change so much, we bonded a bit. His baby was going to be born right before Christmas. He missed our work Christmas party because his baby was being born. We expect him to be gone for paternity leave, but he shows up a few days later. I feared the worst, that the baby had died. It turned out his girlfriend was lying about being pregnant to spend more time with him. I did not think much of it at the time, but the fact that he brought up she was fat for no reason must have meant she was so heavy you could not tell whether she was pregnant or not. She showed him someone else's ultrasounds. They talked about what they would name their baby, how they would handle taking care of it, all that distress. I do not know what she thought was going to happen when 9 months passed and no baby. I guess it is good she came clean, though. A more diabolical person would have faked a miscarriage or something, but that was seriously messed up. Shortly after the dude left, so I do not really know how he handled it. Story 3. 1991, I am 19, just signed the lease for my first solo apartment. Just got the first paycheck from my new job. I deposit the paycheck at an automated teller machine. Another first, I had always gone into the bank to do it. 2 weeks later, I get my bank statement in the mail and see with horror I have only $1.87 in my account. Way wrong, I should have at least $200. I had been very careful with my spending. I am freaked. I came within $2 of bouncing my first rent check. I am literally reaching for the phone to call the bank when the phone rings. It is the police, asking if my automated teller machine card was stolen. I check my wallet and the card is missing. My job at a theater pub came with cash tips, so I did not use the card often, and tell them I was going to call them anyway, because I was missing $200 from my account. Well, we have got your card and your $200, so come down to the police station, they tell me. I cannot figure out how they have my card and the cash. Does not make sense. I drive down there. Detective says someone, let us call him Bob, pulled in to use an automated teller machine and saw a man acting suspiciously while he was using it, moving back and forth as if trying to dodge the camera. Bob says the man then left the automated teller machine, got into a car, and drove away at high speeds as if fleeing. Bob then went to the automated teller machine and put his card in, which popped out. Bob then withdrew $200, and then another automated teller machine card popped out. My card. Bob's card had popped out because the crook had left my card in the automated teller machine before speeding away. Bob realized he had withdrawn the money from my account and not his, so he brought my card and the cash to the police and reported the attempted theft. The detective gives me the description of the crook. According to Bob, it was a man 5 feet 7 inches, brown hair, round gold-rimmed glasses. I say out loud, so, about my height, my color hair, and glasses like mine, before realizing Bob was describing me. I had never deposited a check in an automated teller machine before, so I was moving back and forth, following the instructions on the screen, filling out the envelope with my account number, punching the amount in, and so on. I then forgot to take my card out and just left because I was careless. I drove away at high speeds because I was 19, and that is how I drove everywhere. Worried the detective might be annoyed, I did not tell him I was the crook. I just thanked him and left with the money I stole from myself. Somewhere in a box in my closet, I still have the police report where I am both the victim and the perpetrator. Story 4, I once had a job interview. It was very early in my career, and I was trying to move 500 miles to a new place. I built prototypes and brought samples of my work. It was a 9-hour drive, but everyone seemed so enthusiastic that I figured it was a lock. I did not get the job. I found another job in the area and took it. 6 months later, they called and asked me to interview for the job above the one I had applied for. I was given an offer on the spot and worked there almost a decade. In the first few months, the people there told me the guy whose job I had, who would have been my boss if he hired me initially, had actually said the samples and work I did was beyond him, and he did not want an employee who knew more than him. Well, I guess he does not have that problem since they fired him and replaced him with me. Story 5. One of my good friends in high school started hanging out with this guy from the other public high school in our city, and before long they were basically joined at the hip. She had a huge crush on him and was pretty sure he liked her too, but she had never had a boyfriend before and was too shy to make the first move. One night they were hanging out and he told her he had something big to confess. He was gay. They remained close friends. Then a few months later at a party, the guy introduced all of us to his younger by 1 year brother. The dude and his brother looked similar, had similar personalities and the exact same sense of humor. Fast forward 20 years, and my friend is happily married to the brother, her best friend is her brother-in-law, and he and his husband are godfathers to her kids. Sometimes the painful crush on the gay guy pays off. Story 6. I work at a prison, and a lady flew all the way from Nigeria to visit her brother, who was supposed to be incarcerated at my unit. She speaks little English, but we tried to explain to her that the inmate was not in the system anymore. He must have been released. We call a supervisor, and it turns out he was released over 5 months before. She walks away confused and comes back in with her husband, who speaks English much better. We tell him the scenario and he asks, well, where did he go? He does not have any friends or family in the United States. We told him we do not know where he went. He was released. He could be anywhere. The guy, obviously confused, says, well, he could not have gone anywhere because he does not have any legs. Nandru. So a man without legs from Nigeria with no ties is moving around the United States, and no one knows where he is. Story 7. For a semester in high school, my English teacher set up this game where one student was a secret killer. Every couple of days, the killer would sneak a note into a classmate's locker, backpack, textbook, or whatever that says, you have been eliminated. My best friend and I were trying harder than anyone else in the class to play detective on this, especially near the end of the semester. Near the end of school, there were about 6 students left, and it turns out my best friend was the killer the whole time. They took the last 6 students who were alive and brought them in front of the class one at a time so we could all debate if he or she was the killer or not, and the person could explain their side. The teacher brings my friend up and says, okay, tell us what happened. And my friend starts explaining how he had to be sneaky and so on. So there was a good 20 seconds where I just did not understand what he was talking about. There was not any great reveal or drum roll. He just brought him in front of the class and started explaining how he eliminated everyone. I lost my composure pretty good. The other twist that I forgot to mention is that at week 2 or 3, he went to a student that he did not really talk to much and told him that he was the killer and that he needed him to eliminate John Deere 89. So he hands him a few of the notes, and from then on, he had a guy on the inside helping him eliminate people. That is why he could eliminate so many people without being caught, because if someone got eliminated, I was with my friend so I could vouch for him. The teacher said there was nothing in the rule book that said you could get another person to help you eliminate people. It was a huge gamble because the other kid could have just said, I caught the killer and the game would be over. I forgot to mention that if you guess who the killer is, nothing happens. You have to catch them in the act. So when there are only a few people left, everyone is yelling, you are the killer, and pointing fingers back and forth. Story 8. When I was a teen, some 25 years ago, I played trumpet in the school band. We did a Halloween parade, but I had nothing to dress in costume for. I decided on a large black sheet with a hole in the top for my huge ponytail to stick out from the top in all its glory of crazy, frizzy poof of curls, and a hole for my face and arms to stick out. I got a lot of, "What are you supposed to be?" "I do not know," or was it, I suppose. Anyway, after the parade, my mother wanted to see my locker before leaving just to surprise check for anything not allowed. We passed by the auditorium and noticed a talent show just beginning. Mom pressured me to enter playing my trumpet, in this weird wazit costume no less. By the time I was to go on, I still had no clue what to play. I felt silly in my Halloween costume getup when nobody else was in costume, unless they were dancing or a magician act. I walked down the aisle toward the stage with trumpet in hand, contemplating what to do in my nervousness. Heard whispers among the crowd as I climbed the little 3 steps of stairs up on the stage. I trip and fall up the remaining 2 stairs. I am so clumsy. So I stand up and play it off like I meant to do that, began acting silly and tooting my horn like a duck. Did a silly dance to an improv version of the most basic song to play, Hot Cross Buns or Three Blind Mice. Ripples of kids are giggling in the audience. I see my mother's face contorted in displeasure that I am not being serious enough to win this. Too bad, Mom. This is my time to shine in all my goofy, glorious weirdness. I wiggle my top knot poof and play a few jazzy bits of songs some older folks should know. Then to finish off, I act like I am swimming a bit and begin playing Under the Sea from The Little Mermaid I had learned the year before. End it with pretending to drown as I left back down the stairs without falling. Mom took me out in the hall to have her fit for about 10 minutes while the last contestants finished the show. She then goes off to look through my locker while I put away my trumpet and prepare to leave. I wait for her by the auditorium exit. They begin announcing the winners. I won first place. Story 9. During the last year of my grandfather's life, he had dementia and was having trouble keeping track of reality. Before he was placed into hospice, he kept complaining about a man that was in his house. He would say that he would come around at night and that he was taking his things and using his stuff. Grandma, of course, kept reassuring him that she was the only one there. His doctor increased his medications because he was losing touch with reality so badly. Fast forward to my grandfather's funeral, and a man showed up that was not known by more than a few people in the family. Turns out he was an old friend of my grandmother's who showed up to give his support. In a small town like that, it was not exactly an unusual thing to have random people show up to the funeral home who knew the person at some point. Well, about a year later, my grandmother lets slip that she is seeing someone, the guy from the funeral. At this point, nothing too odd. They got to talking at church, and we thought it was sweet. Then a bit later, sweet innocent Grandma mentions that it is their 3rd anniversary. Grandpa died 2 years prior. This man was the person that Grandpa saw in his house every night. He was the reason that everyone thought Grandpa was losing touch with reality. He was the reason that my grandfather was medicated to the point of being unable to function for the last difficult year of his life. Story 10. There was a cookie exchange at my work. An odd pairing cookie was a rosemary caramel. It was so delicious I had 5 on my break. During the day I was so inspired. I worked in a bakery. I was just having the best day. All my favorite songs came on, and then I started getting these burps. It tasted like the rosemary, but something was off. I started feeling weird and tingly before my lunch break. My hands started to feel odd. Now being the mixer for the day, I worked with heavy machinery and knives. Soon a manager came by and asked if anyone had some cookies. Short while later, I find myself in a room with a handful of other people, all with odd issues. Some were confused, others their stomachs felt off. Emergency medical technicians, poison control, local police, firefighters were all cramming into the room to examine us all. Turns out that odd pairing was cannabis cookies. We were affected more than we realized. Story 11, I worked for a bank at their call center as a workforce admin. We had a supervisor with a higher than normal personnel rotation. People would be doing okay, then suddenly their numbers would drop and quit. In one of those, the guy quitting made a big scene, called him out, insulted him, pushed him around, and ended up being restrained by other coworkers. At the human resources meeting, supervisors going off on this guy, bringing up every single thing the guy did wrong. He was boasting a bit too about how he had to fix all of this dude's mistakes. The entire time the guy sat silent, said nothing, just stared at whomever asked him something. When the human resources rep asked if he had anything to add, he pulled out a tape recorder and just played recording after recording. Of what you ask, of the supervisor literally threatening the guy, harassing him, belittling him, and overall being unpleasant. Apparently, this guy would target overperforming agents and make their working environment difficult to protect his position. I am told the supervisor simply stared at his feet and nodded when told he was fired. The agent, as I understand it, was also let go, but very well compensated. Story 12. Was on a flight from Paris to Boston. I had the aisle seat across from a little hall of bathrooms in the middle of the plane. At one point, a man from a few rows up goes into a bathroom and after a couple of minutes comes out and is just standing in the aisle, so it gets my attention. He keeps going in and coming back out, looking up towards where he is sitting. I see a woman who is sitting next to his empty seat shake her head at him, but he does not give up. Finally, after like 5 times of coming in and out, he finally gets the woman to come back there. The lights are out and most of the plane is sleeping, and once she comes back to him, they start making out in the bathroom hallway before he goes into one and pulls her in with him. They are in there for quite a while, and then he comes out and goes back to his seat, and a few minutes later she comes out and does the same. They are really flirty in their seats, and about an hour later, repeat it. The man goes in, and then she joins him. They end up doing this 3 times throughout the flight. My husband, who is sitting next to me, has caught on to what they are doing as well, and we made a joke about how they must be newlyweds on their honeymoon. We get off the plane, and the woman is standing at the gate waiting, and the man is nowhere in sight. As the people from the back of the plane get off, a completely different man goes up to her and gives her a kiss on the lips and asks her if she was able to get any sleep on the flight and calls her dear. Then they walk off towards the luggage area with their arms around each other. So apparently what we thought was an adventurous, newlywed couple was actually a woman spending time with her seatmate while her husband was sitting in the back of the plane. Story 13. When I started school, I figured out that being raised by your grandparents was not normal. And then when I was a little older, I found out that the reason why was because my biological parents gave me to them. I was told that my biological mother was sick and assumed that I was maybe a few months old at the youngest. No one talked much about my biological father or his family, and I only met his father and stepmom once when I was a toddler. I rarely saw my biological parents while they were together, and only started seeing my biological mother regularly when they divorced, and she moved back to the family home, and we became roommates. Years later, I found out that my biological father remarried and started a new ginger family right away. And then, around 10 or so, I was helping my mom, also known as grandmother, with something, and it involved going through her lockbox of important papers. I found a paper pertaining to the custody case, and it was dated 2 months after I was born. I asked questions, and it turned out that my biological parents gave up after a week, and my biological father wanted to throw me in a dumpster. Lucky for me, my biological mother called her mom, and I was not thrown in the trash. My dad had been at work while all this went down, so that day he came home and found out there was an extra person there for the indefinite future. After my biological father changed his plan to putting me in foster care, my grandparents filed for custody because the thought of not knowing where I was literally nightmare-inducing. Bio Dad popped up a couple times when I was older, and the last time we were in contact, which was through email, he tried to claim that I had been kidnapped, which is not accurate for so many reasons. We do not talk anymore because he is the human equivalent of stepping on a Lego, and I already have a dad who is like if Shepherd Book and Ron Swanson fused into one being. Story 14. Was working a new position in a new store for a company I had worked many years for. I try to develop very good relations with all my coworkers to help the day go by. I joke, I tease, and we sometimes would hang out after work. One of my coworkers, we will call him James, would frequently tease me back. One day he wagged his finger, said, girlfriend, in what I believed to be a teasing manner. Grabbing the moment to tease back, I stated, "Oh, come on, James, only girls can get away with the head bob statements, and we all know you would make an ugly girl." James' scraggly bearded face instantly burst into laughter as everyone around him looked terrified. He laughed and told me I did not understand it, but I happened to say something really funny. Everyone else looked like the color had drained from their faces. Turns out James had been born a girl, and I had met him 3 years after his full transition. He was good-natured about it. I told him to compliment his doctors, who helped him, because he was obviously living his true life that made him happy. Underneath it all, I was mortified and have never made a gender joke since. You never know. Story 15. Years ago when I was in college, I drove back to my hometown to spend Valentine's Day with my best friend, as we were both single and lonely. She got a group of people together and made plans for all of us to go ice skating together on Valentine's Day. A lot of people we knew from high school were going to be there, including this one girl my bestie did not like. When I asked her why she had invited this girl, she started gushing about how much this girl had grown and matured and how impressed she was by her. Well, great, I thought. I love me a good success story, and I was really excited to see her. Well, ice skating never happened. That girl had gotten into an argument with her mother and her ex, during which she had threatened to harm herself. Her mom and ex made the mutual decision to call 911 and have her admitted to the hospital, so my best friend and I went to visit her in the hospital. Now, apparently when you are a female and you are admitted to the hospital for mental health concerns, they do a bunch of tests on you, including a pregnancy test, and they for sure pregnancy tested her. She dropped the bomb on us that she was 8 weeks pregnant. We congratulated her, of course, even though a baby was the absolute last thing she needed. And bless her heart, she seemed to be self-aware enough to realize this, and she kept telling us, no, this is not a good thing. But wait, there is more. You thought the pregnancy was the plot twist, right? Well, little did we know there was much more to come. See, after leaving the hospital, my best friend and I decided to hit up the grocery store for some chocolates and sparkling grape juice to enjoy together. While at the grocery store, we ran into a guy that my best friend knew from elementary school. They made small talk for a few minutes. Now, apparently he knew that girl too, and I cannot remember why, but he brought her up. And here is where it gets interesting. He mentioned that the last time he had seen her was a couple of months ago while hanging out with a mutual friend. My best friend told him that this girl was in the hospital because she had threatened to harm herself, and that we had just visited her in there. And get this, she is 8 weeks pregnant. Upon hearing this news, the poor guy's face went as white as a sheet. He told us that the last time he saw her, which was about 8 weeks ago, he had spent time with her without protection. A few weeks later, she had called him to tell him that she was pregnant and the baby was his. She did not have enough money to pay for a procedure, so he had borrowed $500 from various friends and family members so she could have one. So what he and we wanted to know was this: if she was still pregnant, then where did the money go? It has been almost a decade, and we still do not know the answer. Story 16. Finding out my girlfriend was cheating on me. She and I were going to go to the same college, but she started a semester before I did. Went up to visit her one weekend and had a great time on the campus and met a lot of cool people. Then I get a Facebook message from a guy I met there that was, "Hey, listen, I am sorry to be the one to tell you this, but think you are a really great guy, so I think you deserve to know the truth. She has been cheating on you." I decided to call her and ask her about it, and she admitted it. It was very painful because it was the first long-term relationship I had, and it was especially hard knowing I would have to see her on campus in a few months when I started. Funny thing is that pretty much all her friends that I hung out with when I was there visiting sided with me and ended up becoming some of my closest friends throughout my college years. Story 17, I went to college in Milwaukee, but I took some initial credits at a 2-year campus in Waukesha, a suburb just outside the city, to save money. The University of Wisconsin has a series of 2-year campuses across the state. They did some classes remotely, including German. The professor was on my campus, however, so he did one in-person session and then another section for the remote students at the other campuses all over the state. Anyway, we took a field trip one day to a really good old, world-authentic German restaurant to try some different foods. It was great. He invited all the remote students to come down, but did not expect anyone to make the trip. The day we went, the prof told us one person was coming down from Wausau, almost 3 hours to the north, and also my hometown. Some of my classmates knew I was from up there and have this perception of it being this small up north town. It kind of is, but the whole metro area is probably around 100,000. Small but not true small town living. I explained to them that Wausau is not that small, and I do not know everyone there. It is not like that. Sure enough, this guy shows up, we look at each other for a moment, and he asks, "Hey, are you married to insert my wife's name here?" God damn it. Note, yes, I was married in college. I was still in my 20s. I was a non-traditional student. We got married when my wife finished college, and then she supported us while I went back to finish my degree. She is a saint. Story 18. Several years ago, I went down to the New River Gorge with my wife, then fiancé, and a group of friends to camp and rock climb over Memorial Day weekend. Over the course of the trip, 5 of us decided that on the last day, instead of doing another climbing location, we were going to whitewater rafting. We booked with a guide company and showed up in the morning ready to go. We hopped on the bus to the launch site, and when we got there, we were told that we were going to have an addition to our group of 5. The guy who was introduced to us said he got too tired the night before and missed the first trip of the day that he and his friends had booked, but he lucked out since there was one open spot in the next trip. Great. We load up and start the trip, just chatting with our new rafting friend. Over the course of the ride down, this guy seemed to know his way around a raft and seemed weirdly familiar with the river. At one point, our guide was pointing out a class 2 or 3 rapids section that he said was safe to swim through. This guy immediately jumps out of the raft, climbs up a rock in the middle of the river, and does a perfect 360 flip into the rapids. Near the end of the trip, our guide hits us with the plot twist. We are his first ever group. This was his test, and our suspiciously knowledgeable addition was his supervisor. We were all blown away. We spend the rest of the trip just piecing together the missed clues in the best twist of our lives. Needless to say, the trainee guide passed his test and got a great first review, and a nice tip, and we all got a great story. Story 19. I have a co-worker, Joe, great guy who has an equally great wife, Nina. Over the years, and even prior to meeting Joe, multiple doctors told Nina she would be unable to get pregnant on her own due to problems with her ovaries and fallopian tubes. She and Joe decided that a child-free life was okay with them, so she and Joe married and lived happily for 12 years. When they started out, they did not have much, but as time passed, they progressed in their careers and made a nice life for themselves. Finally, they got to a point that they were comfortable enough to buy a sports car for themselves, something Joe always wanted to do. It was the first new, off-the-lot car they ever owned. Now, Joe and Nina were in their early 40s at this time and figured they would just coast on into retirement. Well, about 6 months after they bought the car, winter came. Nina got a case of the flu she just could not seem to shake. She just felt run down and nauseous, just not herself. After about 3 weeks of this, she went to the doctor. The doctor asked if there was any possibility she could be pregnant. She laughed at him and said, "I have been married for 12 years now and have not had so much as a scare of being pregnant. Multiple doctors said it is just not going to happen for me. No way." But her doctor said, "Humor me and let me rule it out. Just do a urine test." Well, wanting to figure out what was actually wrong with her ASAP, Nina did the test and, you guessed it, pregnant. So in their 40s and with 12 years of living, just the two of them, they were expecting. After the initial shock wore off, they were actually pretty excited even though they had to sell the sports car, since a 2-seater was not really going to work for them. A few months later, their son John came into the world the usual way, happy, healthy baby. So they became a family of 3, and they still are today. John just finished his first year of high school, great kid and super smart too. You just never know what life is going to throw at you. Story 20, I am from a relatively rural area in the South and went to high school with your average stereotypical white rural kids. Went back for a reunion and saw one of the most backwoods guys there with his wife. When I say backwoods, I mean in high school he was a chewing tobacco, pickup driving, flag-waving Appalachian mountain redneck. His wife was very tall and looked familiar, but I could not place her from anywhere, so just chalked it up to her having one of those faces and did not think any more about it. Until later that night when that same guy was loudly confronting another reunion attendee in the parking lot saying, "She is a she, trans women are women, and I love my wife. And if you call her by her high school name one more time, she can visit my ass in prison because I will not tolerate that." Turns out the one kid in high school who was openly different in the rural South in the mid-90s was actually a trans woman who had not come to that conclusion yet, transitioned and fell in mutual love with a man I would have assumed was extremely intolerant. Life is surprising. Story 21. In high school, I often stayed late to work on audio and video projects. In December 1998, I was shooting a segment for the school television channel's annual holiday special. Specifically, my friend was interviewing students, faculty, and staff, those who happened to be around and willing to appear on camera, about their holiday memories. A particular take was spoiled when a group of students walked past and one of them shouted, "Hey, insert interview subject's nickname. Your clothing is hanging out." Enraged beyond reason, I spun the camera on its tripod, pointed it at the group of students laughing as they headed out the nearest door, and informed the offender that I had him on tape. This later became the furthest thing from my mind when I learned that my mother had been critically injured in a head-on collision. The other car, which had veered into her lane, contained 3 girls from my school, the driver and 2 passengers. Tragically, one of the passengers died instantly. I did not know any of these girls personally, but I learned the following day that the one who was killed was the 15-year-old sister of the friend who was interviewing people for my holiday segment. That is not the twist. A couple of weeks later, when I finally began reviewing and editing the footage, a classmate in the room with me made a startling discovery. Among the laughing students was my friend's sister. She was on her way to the car in which she was killed about 20 minutes later. I had unwittingly recorded the last image of her alive and the last time she ever saw her brother. Story 22. I dated a girl who lived in a city I had recently moved away from. On my birthday, I drove out so that we could be together and go out to dinner. The entire time we were at dinner, she was distant and constantly checking her phone and sending texts. There was virtually no conversation, and her constant texting was uncharacteristic and started to give me the vibe that she was either cheating on me or just not that into the relationship anymore. When we finished eating, she asked if it is okay if we stop by a mutual friend's house to pick up some cannabis. I reluctantly agreed, thinking it was a pretty selfish request considering it was my birthday, and I do not use cannabis. As we are walking up the steps to our friend's apartment, I am running through different ways for me to break off the relationship up until the door opens, and I realize she had planned a big surprise party with a ton of my old friends, many of which she did not even know. All of the texts and lack of attention that I had attributed to a lack of interest in me turned out to be the exact opposite. She is a beautiful person. Story 23. I was putting myself through college as a single mom. Met another lady my age going for the same degree. We became friends, or so I thought. One day she just starts criticizing me and gets a bunch of supporters to criticize me too. She accuses me of cheating and tries to get me kicked out of college. She tries to get me fired from substitute teaching by saying I was cheating. She tries to tell people I spend time with other people's husbands. Now we are both like 30 years old. This is some high school behavior she is pulling. I am trying to move on and meet this other lady going for the same degree. She tells me the same thing happened to her with the same woman. We graduate with our associates, and then the 2 of us go on to get our bachelors. She calls me up one day to say she ran into this woman at a restaurant where she, the friend, waitresses. This woman is there with her supporters, and they all start talking about what a loser I am. Friend tells them that I am graduating summa cum laude with my bachelor's and working at General Motors. This woman starts yelling so loudly that the manager asks her to leave. Turns out she flunked out of getting her associates and then got fired from her nail salon for being unkind. She had not worked since, and her husband was about to leave her because of all the money she dumped into her education. Still pretty satisfied about the karma there. Story 24. When I finished university, I started a job about an hour away from my parents' house. The hours were difficult, and the job ended up being the total opposite of what I interviewed for. I roughed it out for almost a year, slowly getting more depressed by the whole situation, until one night I laid in bed till 4 a.m. and had the revelation that I was going to quit. The next morning I go in, and my regional manager tells me that she has a job offer for me for the following year. She wants me to move 3 hours away for exactly the same as what I am making now. No moving bonus, no benefits, nothing. I call my parents on my break and have a meltdown, and they are so worried they drive up after my shift to make sure I'm okay. They end up taking me to dinner at a local casino, and they tell me to swipe my points card to see if I have a coupon for food. I end up losing $100 and we leave for the night. I do not show up for work the next day and hop on a plane to visit my girlfriend who is away at school. As I am walking off the plane, I turn it off airplane mode and have a voicemail. The casino has called my phone and left a message that says, "Hey, give us a call back. Congrats." When I call them, I get asked if I'm sitting down because I won a draw for $10,000. Did not even know I entered the draw, but it did it automatically when I swiped my points card. Flew back Sunday night and went and picked up the money. Got to walk in to work on the Monday and slide a picture of myself holding a giant check across my boss's desk. Left shortly after for a better job with a better company. Story 25. I was seeing this beautiful Italian woman in college, Francesca. I could not believe she liked me, honestly. She had everything. Looks, wealthy family, extremely smart, talented, and I felt I did not deserve her, but she insisted I was great and we fell in love. It was not long before I was over at family events, mingling with her family, gigantic, loving Italian family, and I quickly became friends with her cousin, Marco. Marco was a businessman with a keen eye for talent, or so he put it, and he offered me a job running one of his furniture stores as he was involved in other investments. As it turns out, I was a good furniture salesman. Marco and I were best friends, and I was set to marry Francesca. Life was amazing, and that is when things changed. I started coming home to an empty house. Francesca would be gone for days on end, and then sporadically show up, give me a kiss on the cheek, and disappear again. Marco never seemed to want to hang out anymore, and I was getting extremely suspicious that something weird was going on. One day I was walking through town and decided to stop into a new bakery on a whim, and I saw Francesca there, behind the cash register. I was taken aback because, as long as I knew her, she never mentioned anything about working at a bakery. I approached the register, and her face turned pale with a look of utter embarrassment. Can we talk later?" she said in a hushed but stern tone. I told her sure, but I still wanted a croissant, so she grabbed me a fresh croissant and shooed me out of the door. That night I waited patiently for Fran to call me, and finally my phone rang, and she told me to meet her and Marco outside. So I got up and ran outside to see them both standing in a defensive position, almost ashamed to see me. I demanded to know what was going on, and it was then that Marco explained to me that the reason their family was so wealthy was from illegal dealings and laundering money through various businesses, also known as the furniture store, the bakery, a laundromat, you name it, all owned by members of the family and all fronts for hidden income. I had stumbled upon Francesca at one of the family's businesses. Well, apparently the situation was ending, and they knew they would be going away soon, so they wanted to distance themselves from me, so I did not get wrapped up. Marco touched my shoulder and told me he needed one last thing, that croissant that I took from the bakery. "You never paid for it," he said. I was baffled that he would care about something so small at a time like this, but I asked him what I owed. It was at that point I noticed Marco was not an Italian man at all, but a great big creature from the Paleolithic era with giant eyes and a long neck. That is going to be about tree fitty. Story 26. I met a guy on a cruise ship when I was 13. Long story short, we spent a few days talking and hanging out, and I basically fell head over heels. On the last night, we never got a chance to say goodbye or exchange numbers, and I only knew his first name. It should have been nothing more than a forgotten childhood fling, but for some reason I could never quite forget about him. I guess you could say he was my first love, in a naive sort of way. I went on to have a few long-term relationships, but I always found myself missing this guy I had met so many years ago, and I left those future relationships feeling a kind of emptiness I cannot explain. By a weird string of unlikely events that would take paragraphs to explain, I reconnected with this mystery cruise guy from my childhood 7 years later, at 20 years old. It took a few weeks for him to confirm with his family whether his cruise had been the exact same week as mine, but we confirmed they were the same length of time. Both traveled to the same places and happened around approximately the same time frame. Most significantly, though, the guy I reconnected with randomly told me a very specific story about something that happened at a band concert in sixth grade, and as he told it, I realized it was the exact same story the guy on the cruise had told me. He even told it the same way. We were still waiting for confirmation, but honestly, at this point, I was convinced this was the guy I met years ago. All the details kept lining up perfectly, and things just felt right somehow. We got really close over those next few weeks, talking for hours and hours on end and just really hitting it off. Then he hears back from his sister, and he finds out his cruise was a completely different year than mine, and there is no logical way we could have met before. We are still dating a year and a half later, though. Guess he was the one I was searching for after all. Story 27. There is this guy I used to work with years ago. Let us call him Aaron. Aaron would always whine and complain about everything. It was really annoying. Granted, the company I work for was terrible, but seriously, it is not the worst. And if you do not like it, just pack up and leave. Well, after a year, that is exactly what he did. He phoned in sick for a couple of days and then called again and said he is quitting. Never even handed in his 2-week notice. Apparently, he got a job from another smaller but similar company that was just starting out and was offered a slightly better salary, and so I heard, easier workload. Fast forward 2 years, and our entire company was called in for a meeting by the administrator. He announced that we have acquired this smaller company and will be taking over it in the next couple of months. Turns out it was the same company that Aaron left us for. The previous owner bit off more than he could chew and decided to bail out. Aaron was offered the same compensation as the others who worked the same job as his, but I guess he was too proud for that and just quit again. Story 28. This will probably be super cliche, but my grandma had some rough days in a hospital bed. We were fearing for the worst, and all the family were taking turns to keep her company. This was way before cell phones existed, so communication was not as easy as today. So my dad got a call one of those days, and it was my aunt that was with her. Of course, I do not know exactly what she said, but my dad understood that she was gone. We rushed over there basically as soon as he hung up because he wanted us to say goodbye. During the whole car trip, my dad was crying his heart out. We arrived to the hospital. We were, of course, very sad. We already knew in which room she was, so we went directly there, ready to say goodbye, except she was not gone at all. She was sitting in her bed, eating soup with a nurse, like any other day. I was like 7 years old at the time, and I really freaked out, but was extremely happy about the whole situation. We talked with her for some minutes, and my dad could not stop crying and hugging her. My aunt was not in the room, but she arrived a little later, and my mom was incredibly mad at her for the false alarm. My aunt insisted several times that she'd never said that our grandma was gone. However, in the next half hour or so, the rest of our family arrived to the hospital too, because everybody received a similar call from my aunt, and everybody had the same idea that grandma was gone. I do not remember the exact details, but as far as I recall, the thing was that my grandma had some sort of minor stroke and her heart stopped for a few seconds. But somehow, my aunt exaggerated the situation on the phone calls. We ended up basically having a party in her room that day because all of us were together, which was a very rare scenario in my extended family. And I felt that the sadness we felt before arriving to the hospital made us appreciate more the happiness. And I think that somehow that impromptu family party helped my grandma recover, and she managed to live for a few more years after that. Story 29. My buddy started dating this girl. She was from the opposite side of the country, says her dad is some very wealthy guy in Singapore or the Philippines. She says she has a large trust. They get pretty serious, and she rents this luxurious condo here, buys a brand new Escalade, a dog. He moves in with her. He is a chess person, so she goes and has her chest enhanced. She says she has to go back across the country every so often to see her sisters and family. This goes on for a year or two. My buddy always asks to go with her to meet her sisters and family, and finally she agrees over Thanksgiving, but says he has to get a hotel room because she does not want her family to know she is living with someone outside of marriage. Thanksgiving morning, he wakes up to a knock on the door. She is not in the room, so he answers it, and it is some random guy who turns out to be his girlfriend's husband. Her sisters she has pictures of and talks about are her children, and her husband is the very wealthy one, not her dad. They sat and talked for a good half hour, and then I got a phone call on Thanksgiving asking if I can pick him up at the airport later that evening. Oh, and she said she was our age at the time, 24-ish, and turns out she was 38. Story 30. Had a long-time client bring her rabbit in because her estranged husband had been keeping it and neglecting it while she and her kids were in a women's shelter. After checking the rabbit out, doing a nail trim, cutting some mats out, and feeding it some recovery food, she explained how she got the rabbit back. Her oldest kid, probably 11 or 12, had been staying with her mother-in-law, but her mother-in-law had not been letting her son, my client's husband, see the kid because there was a restraining order against him for the entire family, physical abuse. So my client's husband found out when his oldest kid was at his mother's house, went over there with a gun, harmed his own mother right in front of the kid, and tried to take his son. The kid got away and ran to a neighbor's house to call the cops. My client had gotten the rabbit back when the cops came to her for permission to search her husband's house. This whole thing happened within like 8 hours of when she brought the rabbit in right before we closed for the day. We did not charge her for the visit. We let her stay in the clinic as long as she wanted. I think the doc even went next door to buy her a pizza. Story 31. When I worked at an amusement park, our employee parking lot had this lifted truck with flames on the side, huge smokestacks and truck decorations on the back. We affectionately named it Douchebag Truck. One night, we are walking through the parking lot, and we have all had a massive amount to drink. I make a comment that I need to puke, and someone jokingly said to puke in the back of Douchebag Truck. I did, without hesitation. We all laughed, and then another friend decided he had to pee in the back of Douchebag Truck. Again, we laughed. Flash forward a month, I am at a party with my friends, and this angry guy starts a fight with this hippie dude. We break up the fight, and the hippie was grateful, so he bought us all beers, and we all became fast friends. The day hippie friend is moving out, we all offer to help him pack and move. We follow him, boxes in hand, as he leads us to Douchebag Truck. We stared in disbelief. Nothing could have prepared me for this. Story 32. A few years ago, I was in Cuba with some friends, and on the second night we went to a club called The Cave. We were having a good time on the dance floor when all of a sudden we see this chick bent over with a guy dancing behind her, and her face leaning into another guy's crotch. It was dark, and my friends and I slowed down our groove trying to make sense of what was happening, and honest to God, I am pretty sure she was giving a guy attention on the dance floor. Fast forward to the end of the week, we are on the plane heading back home. I was sitting next to this guy who was raving about how this was his first time out of the country, Canada, and that he had such a good time. We were trading stories back and forth, and he said 2 days before we left, he met this one chick with a solid body and how she was amazing. I was telling him how we went to the cave and was showing him pictures from my camera. We are scrolling through and he stops on one and points to a girl in the background. That was the girl I spent time with. I took a closer look at the pic, and sure enough, it was the chick that was with those two guys on the dance floor. Poor kid. Did not have the heart to tell him what I witnessed. Did not want to drop a bomb on his first vacation. Story 33 happened to me earlier this year. For context that will be important later, I work in human resources for a well-known corporation, and my parents have been divorced since 2010. I was at work when my sister texted me a screenshot of a Facebook message. It was a girl in her mid-20s who was asking my sister to help her get in touch with me, though she did not say why. I told my sister that it was probably just a person who wanted a job with my company and saw that I was in human resources there. There have been enough odd people friending me on LinkedIn over the last few years that it seemed like the most logical explanation. Did not think more about it until I talked to my mom later in the day and found out that she had received a similar message from the same person. When I saw my wife that evening, she had a message as well. At this point, I was a little worried that we were dealing with an actual confused person. My wife brought up the possibility that since I had taken the 23andMe genetic test a few years back and was sharing my results, maybe it was a distant relative who was just a little too excited about genealogy. I thought it was unlikely, but decided I would check the site later that night, which I did from my phone while I was taking a dump about an hour after dinner. Good thing I was already pooping, because I would have anyway when I saw the results. She was my half-sister. After a brief moment of shock, I called my dad and asked him why I had a half-sister showing up on my genetic matches. He said that he would be over later. We were staying at his place for a few weeks, waiting to take occupancy of our new house, but he did not sound overly concerned, which was weird given the circumstances. He showed up about an hour later with my mom. They proceeded to explain to me that they had trouble conceiving and that my biological father was actually an anonymous sperm donor. They were under the impression that his sample was only used to create me and my sister, but that was obviously not the case. I went from having one sibling to at least 9 that I know of. I have been in contact with some of them, and it has been pretty cool getting to know them. Also, it totally explained why I have weak calves. Story 34, bit late to the party, but I have a good one. My best friend was dating this girl that he met on Tinder for approximately 18 months. She had a kid from a previous abusive relationship and also has post-traumatic stress from the previous relationship. She also had cancer and spent a fair bit of time in the hospital. However, she would never let my friend see her while she was in hospital. One day he gets a message from her Facebook account, but it is from someone claiming to be her boyfriend. She had been dating both of them for 18 months. She faked having cancer, and whenever she was in hospital, she was actually with the other guy. The post-traumatic stress was also fake. She told both of them she had post-traumatic stress, but had different symptoms depending on who she was with. At one point, she faked a pregnancy and subsequent loss with my friend, but never mentioned it to the other boyfriend. Turns out she has a long history of doing this kind of thing to get money from people. The biological father of the kid took her to court for custody of the child and won full custody. He was never abusive, by the way, and now my friend and the other guy are looking at taking her to court for fraud. Story 35. During my senior year of high school, my friend's home life started to fall apart. His dad was a massive alcoholic who had lost most of their money day trading. His mom started to use the kids as weapons against their dad, leading to a Cold War-type situation in the house. None of the kids wanted to take sides, but eventually each one was pulled into one scheme or another. They would hide things, sneak things to secret storage units, go to events with one parent over the other, and so on. The most ridiculous situation came when their mother asked my friend's little brother to steal the key to the mailbox and secretly get it copied at the hardware store. She claimed that the father was taking her mail in order to make her miss important correspondences and look like an unfit mother for court proceedings. This was obviously exaggerated talk, but the brother had the key made regardless. A few months later, the mom asked my friend's brother to copy the key again. Apparently, the lock had been changed. She claimed that the father had bugged the house, was monitoring everyone's texts, and was basically employing their little sister as a spy to have a full grasp on everything happening in the house. That is how he knew the key was copied. More exaggerated talk. Well, all this kept happening for a long time. We left for college and eventually came back the next summer. Due to other family drama, it wound up that for about 2 weeks, my friend and his brother were living at home by themselves. Obviously, they turned the house into a den of underage drinking and weed smoking. Soon, someone had the idea to go looking for some of the bongs and weed paraphernalia that had been taken by the parents over the years. So we went into the father's room. We found the bongs, but we also found so much more. He had an entire dresser full of unopened mail. He had stacks of printed out text conversations from every member of the family. He had surveillance equipment. He also had a bunch of weed and a double-sided adult toy, but that part is not important. Turns out the mom was not crazy. Story 36. In school, we once went to see a court case. Everyone told me that it was not going to be like in the movies. But let me tell you, it was pretty exciting. We already knew beforehand that the accused had pledged guilty, and we therefore assumed that it was going to be a quick case, but so much was unraveled. So the case was about a guy that had robbed another guy in the middle of the night. During the trial, the judge asked the accused why he had robbed that person at the exact spot he did. It happened at 4 a.m. after all, and the accused was like, no reason. Turned out it happened in front of a brothel from where the person, accuser, had just come out, and the robber was sort of nice enough to try to save that guy's dignity and tried not to mention it. Also, I imagine that this whole situation was so much more awkward for the accuser because a whole class of 17-year-old girls was there watching him. Then the accuser was super annoyed and talked about how the robber had tried to apologize to him and how he was not going to accept that apology. And the judge was all like, yeah, that does not really matter in a legal setting. Then they talked about the robber's immigrant background and how he had already been married, and that did not work out, although he was only about 21, and some more family drama. It truly felt like a crazy soap opera. Then in the break, the robber even began talking to one of us girls, and our teacher was super into it and hoped to get some intel into the case. I would not say it was one big plot twist, but truly a roller coaster of events and in general, a very weird afternoon. Story 37. So my girlfriend and I currently live in Taiwan and have been for nearly 2 years now. We will be leaving soon to go back to South Africa to pursue other interests. Anyway, we are both fans of tattoos, and so we decided a while back to get each other's Chinese names, which are given to us when we arrived, tattooed on our asses before we leave. So we go looking for the closest tattoo shop, as it is not a big job, so we did not feel the need to research as thoroughly as we did before our other ones. Luckily, there is a shop literally 2 minutes walk from our place. So we go in to suss the place out and look at the guy's work. The tattoo artist does not speak any English, and our Mandarin is not great either. So he calls his brother to come translate. So we get it all booked and sorted, and our appointment was for that coming Sunday. We arrive on Sunday and start getting it done. His brother is there, and we are all chatting away happily. His mom is also there taking photos and being the typical embarrassing mom. It is a family business, and the whole family is tattooed up and seems super proud of their tattoo artist son. Anyway, my girlfriend gets hers done, and then while we are waiting for the stencil to dry on my ass, the artist invites me out for a smoke outside. We are smoking, and I notice this tattoo on his neck, and the style looks very familiar. So I pointed it out and said the tattoo artist's name, which is Doctor. He nodded and smiled and said, yes, yes, doctor. I then pulled up my sleeve to show him my first tattoo, which was also done by Doctor. Now this blew both our minds because Doctor is a South African artist and as far as I knew had not traveled, although he must have because I knew this guy had not been to South Africa. But to randomly stumble into a shop in Asia that is a couple minutes walk from me and then find out the guy has been tattooed by the same guy who lives halfway across the world from there blew my mind a little bit. Story 38. I was about 14, do not remember my exact age, although I could reverse engineer it. I had never kissed a girl, never really had a girlfriend. I was a gawky and introverted nerd living in a little town. Did not have many friends and not all that crazy about most of the few I did have. I was the smartest kid in my class, but scrawny and unathletic. In the span of a few years, I had somehow gone from being one of the cool kids in my grade to being one of the people who are mostly ignored by the cool kids. I felt alone and isolated most of the time. My older brother gets married and they have a major wedding reception at her parents' house in a town about 10 miles away from my hometown. 2 bars, no one cares if kids are drinking. This house is an old mansion in a hick town in the Midwest, has about 20 rooms. I have had some drinks and am feeling good when someone tells me that one of the bridesmaids has a little sister my age who thinks I am cute. I eventually find her, it is a huge party, and we chat for a bit and hit it off. She is pretty and seems bright and funny and nice. I have visions of having a real girlfriend for the first time. I feel like this could be a turning point in my life. I have met a cool girl, and she actually seems to like me. Between the alcohol buzz and the unexpected situation, I feel like a little kid who has come downstairs on Christmas morning and found everything he wants under the tree, plus a bunch of other great stuff he did not even know existed. We roam off, holding hands, and find an empty room. We sit on a little couch and talk some more. Finally, I work up my nerve, and I kiss a girl for the first time in my life, and she pukes in my mouth and runs out of the room.